Imagine walking into a room full of people. Your heart starts racing, your palms get sweaty, your mind suddenly goes blank, and all you can think about is whether everyone in that room is watching you, judging you, waiting for you to say something embarrassing. For millions of people around the world, this is not just an occasional uncomfortable moment. It is a daily reality that shapes every decision they make, every conversation they have, and every opportunity they either take or quietly walk away from. Social anxiety is one of the most common psychological experiences humans face, yet it remains deeply misunderstood. People who struggle with it are often told to simply relax, stop overthinking, or just be more confident, as if it were a choice they were actively making. But here is the truth that changes everything. Social anxiety is not a flaw in your character, it is not a sign of weakness, it is actually your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do, just doing it at the wrong time, in the wrong place, and in response to the wrong kind of threat. To understand why we get social anxiety, we have to go way back to a time when being accepted by the group around you was not just emotionally important, it was the difference between surviving and dying. For the vast majority of human history, we did not live in cities or suburbs or apartments. We lived in small tribes, tightly knit groups of people who depended on each other for food, protection, and survival. In that environment, being rejected by your social group was not just painful, it was potentially fatal. If you were cast out of the tribe, you were alone in a world full of predators, harsh weather, and scarce resources. Your chances of surviving on your own were extremely low. This means that over hundreds of thousands of years, natural selection heavily favored individuals who were deeply sensitive to social cues, who paid close attention to how others perceived them, and who worked hard to maintain their standing within the group. The brains that survived were the ones that treated social rejection as a genuine threat, almost as dangerous as a physical attack. And so the brain developed a system for detecting and responding to social threats, a system that runs through one of the oldest and most powerful structures in the brain, the amygdala. The amygdala is a small, almond-shaped cluster of neurons located deep in the brain, and it functions like a biological alarm system. When it detects something it perceives as threatening, it triggers the fight-or-flight response, flooding your body with adrenaline, raising your heart rate, tensing your muscles, and sharpening your focus. This response was incredibly useful when the threat was a predator or a rival tribe. The problem is that the amygdala does not always distinguish between a lion in the grass and a group of coworkers in a meeting room. To a brain wired for tribal survival, both can feel equally dangerous. So here's where things get interesting. The very mechanism that kept your ancestors alive is the same mechanism that makes you freeze up before a presentation, avoid making phone calls, or replay a conversation from 3 days ago wondering if you said something wrong. The brain is not malfunctioning, it is actually working as intended. It is just applying ancient survival logic to a modern social world. When you walk into a party and feel that wave of anxiety wash over you, your amygdala has essentially flagged the situation as potentially threatening. It is scanning the environment, reading faces, interpreting body language, and asking a very primal question. Am I safe here? Do these people accept me? The prefrontal cortex, the rational, logical part of your brain, might know perfectly well that you are at a birthday party and no one is going to hurt you. But the amygdala does not wait for a logical analysis. It reacts first and asks questions later. This is why social anxiety can feel so irrational. On some level, that there is nothing to be afraid of. But knowing that does not make the fear go away, because the fear is not coming from the part of your brain that deals in logic and reason. It is coming from a much older, much faster, and much more powerful system. And once that alarm is triggered, it is very difficult to simply think your way out of it. The physical symptoms, the racing heart, the shallow breathing, the sweating, these are all part of the same ancient response, and they can actually make the anxiety worse by giving you something new to worry about. Now, you are not just afraid of being judged, you are afraid that people will notice you are afraid. Biology is only part of the story. The other major ingredient in social anxiety is experience, specifically the experiences your brain has stored and labeled as socially dangerous. The brain is a pattern recognition machine. It is constantly taking in information, comparing it to past experiences, and using those comparisons to predict what might happen next. If you grew up in an environment where you were frequently criticized, mocked, or made to feel like you did not belong, your brain learned a very specific lesson. Social situations are risky. Other people are unpredictable. Showing your true self might lead to rejection or humiliation. These lessons do not just stay as memories. They become filters through which you interpret every new social interaction. A neutral expression on someone's face gets read as disapproval. A moment of silence in a conversation gets interpreted as boredom or judgment. Your brain is not trying to make your life harder. It is trying to protect you from repeating a painful experience it has already cataloged. This is also why social anxiety often feels so personal and specific. Some people are perfectly comfortable speaking to strangers but fall apart in front of authority figures. Others can handle large crowds but struggle intensely in one-on-one conversations. The specific shape of your social anxiety often reflects the specific experiences that taught your brain where the danger lies. And because these patterns are learned, they can also be unlearned, though that process takes time, patience, and often the right kind of support. Once social anxiety takes hold, it tends to feed itself through a set of very predictable thinking patterns. One of the most powerful is called the spotlight effect, which is the tendency to believe that other people are paying far more attention to you than they actually are. Research consistently shows that people dramatically overestimate how much others notice their mistakes, their appearance, or their behavior. In reality, most people are far too focused on their own thoughts and concerns to be scrutinizing you as closely as you imagine. Another common pattern is post-event processing, which is that exhausting habit of mentally replaying social interactions after they are over, searching for everything you might have done wrong. This kind of rumination does not help you improve. It simply reinforces the belief that social situations are dangerous and that you are not equipped to handle them. There's also a tendency toward what psychologists call mind reading, assuming you know what other people are thinking, and almost always assuming the worst. These thinking patterns are not signs of irrationality. They are the natural output of a brain that has been trained to stay vigilant in social situations. But they create a feedback loop that makes anxiety harder and harder to escape. Understanding why social anxiety exists does not make it disappear overnight. But it does change the relationship you have with it when you recognize that your anxious brain is not broken, but is instead trying to protect you using tools that are simply outdated. Something shifts. The self-criticism softens a little, the shame loses some of its grip. You start to see the anxiety not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a very old, very well-meaning part of yourself that learned the wrong lessons about where the danger is. Cognitive behavioral therapy, commonly known as cognitive behavioral therapy, remains one of the most well-researched and effective approaches for social anxiety. It works by gradually helping the brain update its threat assessments, teaching it through repeated experience that social situations are survivable, that rejection is not fatal, and that showing up imperfectly is far better than not showing up at all. Mindfulness practices also play a powerful role, not by eliminating anxious thoughts, but by changing your relationship to them. When you can observe a thought like everyone is judging me without immediately believing it or reacting to it, you create space between the alarm and the response. And in that space, you find a little more freedom. Social anxiety is deeply human. It is the echo of every ancestor who ever had to navigate the complex, high-stakes world of tribal belonging. Honoring that history while gently teaching your brain that the modern world operates by different rules, that is the quiet, ongoing work of healing.